This is a turnip, a wild turnip, and it's just about on its last days. The top's gonna dry off and fall off. You can still dig it. Uh, they call it muktan. It was a main food source of the Cheyenne people. As a child, my grandmother would come here and we would fill up gunny sacks full of turnips. We had about 5 or 6 shovels. And would take the gunny sacks full of turnips down to the creek, and the girls would wash them and peel them. And my grandmother would braid them into long ropes. We would, after they were dry, she would put them in a sack, a box, or some kind of a sack, strong sack. We would take them to the road to the mail carrier, and we would stop the mail wagon, and she would hand the address to that person, and she would give him money for the stamps, and she would send these turnips to her relatives in Oklahoma. So we always had strings of these. They represent a part of our history. It tells of 2 girls that dug a hole, and they dug too deep, and the earth started to cave away. And when they looked down there was another earth in that hole. And with the Lakota people, they are experts on braiding their turnips in long braids. So they made coils and coils of a rope so that it could reach the other earth. And after they got enough, they would put it down till it touched the other earth. The Lakota call it timsala. We call it muktan. They crawled down, and the girl crawled down, and she discovered the Lakota people. So because of that, they have timsala, or turnips, at every gathering. They have every meal they have for a birthday or a celebration of something. They remember them girls that dug the timsala. The Cheyennes also have almost an identical story, but the rope that the Cheyenne girl made, it didn't reach the ground, and she hung on as long as she could, and she eventually fell, and she busted up into a million pieces when she hit the ground. There's a lot of stories about that. She was with child, and they called him Star Child, but he was part stone, so he didn't die. And but there's so many stories about all of our plants that are handed down. These are the stories that they share at night to all the children. The woman knew these stories because the women were the ones that went out and harvested turnips and different things. And it was real interesting when all the girls would go out and pick turnips. All the men would recognize that what the women were doing. So the men would go down, and they'd wait for the woman or the men would go down and to their horse herds and get the ugliest horse and skinniest horse they could find. And they would decorate it with willow branches. And they would get ready. They would paint themselves up like a clown or with different colored paints and wrap willow around themselves. And in the evening, as the woman was coming in, they would stand on a hill and taunt the warriors. They would stand there with sticks and buffalo dung and rocks, and the old warriors would ride out of the village like they were going on a warpath. they were attacking the enemy, and they would be hollering. And they were riding their skinny, the ugliest horses they could find. And everybody was laughing at them. And they would attack the woman, and the woman would throw rocks at them and sticks and bones. And they would fight the warriors off. But a warrior that had counted coup many times on the field of battle, the woman couldn't hit him. He could ride right in and take as many of the turnips as he wanted. They allowed him that. They afforded him that because he was a great warrior. Well, they would fight off the other young braves with their skinny horses, and eventually everyone had turnips, and the little girls and the woman would all have a memory that they'd never forget. How they used to pick turnips, and who had the ugliest horse, and how they knocked one off of a horse with a stick. They talked of all these things, and in the lodges in the winter time, there was so much laughter remembering the memory of picking turnips and fighting the men on their ugly horses. So I'm going to dig this turnip and dig it up and show you what it looks like. Yeah, it's just about, it's almost gone. This is real dry ground. Look at the bottom. That's your turnip. When you pick a turnip, you always put the seeds back in the hole. That way it'll grow again. But this is your turnip. This is the tail. You cut this part off here, you peel it, and you braid this with you braid it into the rope. This is one of the food sources of the Indian people, the Plains Indian. But it's a high starchy food, and the kids love picking them. The little girls, when they would play away from their camp, they played like they were adults. The little boys would go hunting, and they would choose one of the girls as their mother or their sister, and they would the girls would pick different roots, Mariposa lily, this stuff, cattails, while the boys went hunting for rabbits and squirrels and birds, their bows. And when the girls were taught survival skills at a very early age of how to identify plants that they could eat. And this is how they pick the timsalo, or the turnip, mukhtan. And you could dry it, and you can boil it like a potato in the wintertime. A lot of people, they just, little kids, you cut it up into equal sized pieces, that way it'll cook the same. And they're nice and white inside. They're these are drying up pretty good. But you can They're good eating. We dry them all the time, but they're pretty good eating. You can mix them with meat and stuff like that. You can dry great bundles of them. But that's your turnip, one that's we identified right here.